Okay, let's dive right into this explainer with a massive reality check. Look, we all absolutely love a good underdog story, right? You walk down the street, you see a vendor selling goods from a cart, and you think, now there is a brilliant, scrappy entrepreneur. We naturally imagine they're these clever rebels, hiding from the tax man, outsmarting a rigged system, just waiting for their big break. Well, actually, scratch that. We are completely wrong. That entire romantic vision, it's a lie. The unofficial economy is not some hidden engine of genius. It's an inescapable trap. Today, we are tearing down the myth of the informal street vendor. So prepare for some brutal truths, because this is going to change how you look at global poverty forever.
So the big question gets thrown around all the time. Are street vendors actually stealing market share from honest, tax-paying companies? Wealthy consulting firms like McKinsey, they complain incredibly loudly about this. They constantly claim informal businesses are just unfair competition. They say these unregistered guys are undercutting the formal economy and completely ruining growth. And you know what? It sounds incredibly logical at first glance. The vendor pays zero tax, so obviously he has an unfair advantage, right? Wrong. It is a complete, utter myth. They are absolutely not competing with big business. They aren't even playing the same game. Corporate fear here is totally misplaced. Let me prove it to you.
Welcome to what we call the two-world rule. On one side, you have the myth, a fantasy of hidden entrepreneurs skillfully dodging taxes. But the brutal reality? We're talking about uneducated managers with literally catastrophic productivity. They are trapped in a pure survival tier. The golden rule of fear is incredibly simple, but really harsh. The poor sell strictly to the poor. A guy selling low-quality wooden chairs on a dirt road does not steal a single customer from a high-end corporate furniture store. They exist in entirely separate universes. They do not cross paths. They do not touch.
Section 1. Face-slapping data. The productivity chasm. Let's look at the numbers. We aren't just guessing here. This is grounded in comprehensive World Bank data spanning 24 African countries. Just look at this gap, $1,138 versus $7,169. To put that in perspective, that is the value a single employee produces in one entire year in Egypt. The tiny, unregistered firm generates barely over $1,000, but the formal firm, over $7,000. The formal firm isn't just, a little bit better. It is in an entirely different stratosphere. Informality basically guarantees poverty. And when you bring big formal firms into the mix, they are over 250% more productive than the informal ones. It's a complete paradigm collapse. It's not even a competition. If you are small and unregistered, your productivity is essentially flatlining. You are barely surviving day to day. You are not a competitive threat to anyone. Section 2. Why the weak stay weak. The talent floor.
Now, the popular excuse you always hear is a lack of finance. People love to say that throwing microloans at these vendors will magically turn them into major corporations. But bank loans won't fix the core rot. It all comes down to human capital, brains. In formal firms, almost 67% of managers have a college education. They actually know how to run things. But in the informal sector, a pathetic 7.2%. You just cannot build a highly productive business without skills. Low skills instantly equal low-quality output. Talent dictates the ceiling of a business. And in the informal economy, that ceiling is firmly on the floor.
And this builds into a truly devastating cycle. Step 1, you have an uneducated manager. Step 2, because there are no skills, there's no scale, which means you can't attract the capital needed for vital assets, like electricity generators. Step 3, no reliable power equals terrible low-quality goods. Step 4, because the goods are low quality, you can only sell to other poor people who literally can't afford anything better. Which brings us to Step 5, you are completely trapped. You can never level up to sell to formal companies. This whole setup isn't some clever stepping stone, it's a concrete dead end.
And here's the kicker. When you ask real, formal businesses what they actually worry about on a daily basis, they do not care about street vendors. It's a total non-issue. Only a tiny fraction even mention informal competition. So what actually keeps corporate CEOs awake at night? Power outages, a complete lack of reliable electricity, a massive lack of real systemic financing. Big business is fighting the broken infrastructure of the entire country. They're certainly not fighting the desperate guy selling fruit on the corner.
Section 3. The study's fatal blind spot. Uncovering the flaws.
Now, we have to be fair here. Even brilliant academic research has massive blind spots. Let's do a quick teardown of the methodology. First off, the data heavily relies on self-reported numbers. Think about that for a second.
They are asking known tax evaders to accurately report their income. Do we really trust them to report every single dollar? Absolutely not. Second, the researchers totally ignored seasonal workers. This falsely boosts the productivity numbers of the informal guys, making them look better than they are. Third, they had zero real metrics for actual physical capital. So the reality of the street vendor is likely much, much worse than even these grim numbers suggest.
Section 4. Stop taxing the poor. The policy nightmare. So if the informal economy is this fragile and this deeply trapped, the political instinct is basically always to step in, regulate, and tax. But that instinct is catastrophic. The authors of the data say it plainly and without any apology. Taxing them or forcing compliance literally puts them out of business. If you force these incredibly inefficient businesses to register with the government, they simply die. They do not have the margins to pay taxes. They do not have the education to handle complex bureaucracy. Formality here isn't a magic wand that fixes poverty. It is an executioner.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly uncomfortable thought. If forcing the poor to register destroys their absolute only livelihood, are we trying to cure poverty by killing the patient? Pushing strict tax compliance at the very bottom creates mass starvation, not economic growth. We have to stop romanticizing the informal sector. True, systemic growth comes from empowering highly productive formal firms at the top, not from crushing the desperate survivors at the bottom. Think about that the next time you see a street vendor.